Hello and welcome to this ongoing lecture series in thermodynamics. We have been putting together a thermodynamic framework from scratch, and in the last set of lectures we derived the Maxwell relations and sort of set the stage for obtaining various thermodynamic properties as a function typically of measurable quantities. So this was the sort of goal that was espoused in the last part of the lecture. Now we will go about using the Maxwell relations and deriving the various thermodynamic properties. So to recap, this was sort of the last slide of the last part of the lecture. What are the various thermodynamic properties? Specific heat capacities, coefficient of thermal expansion, isothermal compressibility, adiabatic compressibility, Joule-Thomson coefficient, and energies, which is basically internal energy and enthalpy, as well as entropy as a function of measurable quantities such as temperature, pressure, and volume. So let's start with specific heat capacities. Specific heat capacity of a system is the amount of thermal energy added to 1 mole of the system. This is a molar specific heat capacity that is being defined for increasing the temperature of the system by 1 unit. So in this particular measurement of specific capacity, the system does not exchange energy or material with the surroundings. So you have an insulated system. Obviously temperature is changing and the system is as close to perfectly insulated as possible. That means the boundary is an adiabatic boundary, and the boundary is definitely an impermeable boundary. No material is exchanged with the surroundings. Now you can have, for the other work mode, either a rigid boundary, which means the volume is fixed. The heat capacity then is measured at constant volume, and the energy that you are looking at, how much energy increase is there in the appropriate energy thermodynamic potential to use here is internal energy. On the other hand, when the boundaries are moving, which means there is mechanical equilibrium with the surroundings, so any possible increase in the internal system pressure will be immediately compensated by by a reversible expansion with towards the surroundings, or vice versa. If there is any decrease in the internal system pressure, then immediately there will be a reversible compression of the system. So throughout the process, then the pressure is fixed. Then the heat capacity is measured at constant pressure. For this, the appropriate thermodynamic potential of the system is enthalpy. Therefore, you have specific capacity at constant pressure is partial derivative of enthalpy with respect to temperature at constant pressure. Specific capacity at constant volume is the partial derivative of internal energy with respect to temperature at constant volume. So these are the specific capacities. Now let us turn our attention to molar specific heat capacities. So let us consider the molar specific capacity at constant volume. We defined this to be dou U dou T at constant volume. That is basically T dou S minus P dou V for a change in given temperature at constant volume. Since volume is held constant, this quantity is 0, and therefore we have basically T dou S dou T at constant volume. Similarly, for specific heat capacity at constant pressure, this is dou H dou T at constant pressure, and dou H is T dou S plus V dou P, but of course since pressure is constant, V dou P is 0, so we get Cp is T dou S dou T at constant pressure. So what is the difference between these two specific heat capacities? Cp minus Cv is therefore simply T into dou S dou T at constant pressure minus dou S dou T at constant volume. So this is the question of how much is there is a change in entropy, change in the molar entropy, molar multiplicity per unit volume, all right, with change in temperature when the boundary is moving and the internal and external pressures are always balanced and therefore the pressure is constant, there is mechanical equilibrium, versus how much there is change in entropy with a change in temperature when the boundary is rigid. Now if the boundary is moving, then there is a possibility of higher entropy than when the boundary is rigid, because now you are allowing for increased volume. So this is the idea, right? So remember we discussed the physical meaning of pressure. What we said was the system always tries to expand to maximum volume, and pressure is the driving force for it. The internal pressure, of course, is the driving force for it, and all this happens so as to maximize entropy. So really Cp should be greater than Cv, and that's what it will turn out to be. Now let us try and see what is this difference in between Cp and Cv. In order to understand this, first let us write S as a function of PV. So ds is basically either due to dt or dv. Now what we are going to do is we are going to use the chain rule. And this is another form of the chain rule that we saw. Dou f dou y at constant A is dou f dou x at constant y times dou x dou y at constant A plus dou f dou y at constant x, where f is a function of x and y. Now I'm going to take, of course, S is entropy, y is temperature, and x is volume, and then I'm going to take a new variable which is pressure. So this basically tells us that dou s dou t at constant pressure is dou s dou t at dou s dou v, sorry, x is volume, dou s dou v at constant temperature times dou v dou t at constant pressure plus dou s dou t at constant volume, right? So we got our two quantities here. If you multiply this by temperature, you will get Cp. If you multiply this by temperature, you will get Cv. And so the difference between them is now expressed in terms of this particular product of the two partial derivatives. Therefore, dou s dou t at constant P minus dou s dou t at constant V, which is basically T times temperature times Cp minus Cv, right? This is basically T times ds dou s dou t at constant pressure minus T times dou s dou t at constant volume is Cp minus Cv. So this basically, this difference is Cp minus Cv by T. Sorry, I said it wrong earlier. So this is Cp minus Cv by temperature. Now this is equal to this particular product, dou s dou v at constant temperature times dou v dou t at constant pressure. So this is what we see. Cp minus Cv time divided by T is this difference, which is this product. Okay. So now what I am doing here is I am changing this dou s dou v at constant temperature to dou p dou t at constant volume through Maxwell relation. And then, so this basically then gives us some measurable quantities here. From the Maxwell relation, dou s dou v at constant temperature is equal to dou p dou t at constant volume. Now I am going to construct a cyclic relation from this equation of state. F of p v t is equal to 0. So this is typically pressure volume temperature relationship. So basically, if you write dou p dou t at constant volume, all right, we are going to use a cyclical relation of pressure volume temperature, which basically gives dou p dou v at constant temperature times dou v dou t at constant pressure times dou t dou p at constant volume is minus 1. Therefore, what we had in the expression for Cp minus Cv by T was dou p dou t at constant volume. That was one of the terms that we had. And we of course had dou v dou t at constant pressure too. Dou p dou t at constant volume had to be evaluated. So that can be obtained basically by taking this term to the other side, dou P dou T at constant volume with a negative sign is given by dou P dou V at constant temperature times dou V dou T at constant pressure. So Cp minus Cv is T into this dou P dou T at constant volume times dou V dou T at constant pressure. So this basically is minus T into dou P dou V at constant volume times dou V dou T at constant pressure, the whole square. There was one term here. The second term comes from substituting for this term this product, which also contains a dou V dou T at constant pressure. Now we take the definitions of the coefficient of thermal expansion, which basically gives dou V dou T at constant pressure, and the coefficient of isothermal compressibility, which gives dou V dou P, the inverse of this partial derivative, at constant temperature. So therefore, dou V dou P at constant temperature is minus V into kappa T, whereas dou V dou T at constant pressure is beta into V, and this is going to get squared. So therefore, when you substitute this negative signs become both positive, and then you get basically T into V. Okay, so one of the V's will get cancelled here because you will get V square at the numerator, and then V in the denominator, they will get cancelled. So you get T V into beta square by kappa T. And this, you notice, all of these are positive quantities. Temperature is a positive quantity, molar volume is a positive quantity, coefficient of thermal expansion is a positive quantity, and isothermal compressibility is also a positive quantity, and therefore Cp is always greater than Cv. So now we turn our attentions to coefficients of expansion and compression. Now the first question that we are going to look at is heat is being added to a system, all right, and we are asking how much does the system expand due to the addition of heat while being maintained at constant pressure. So here basically the boundary is moving boundary. The boundary is also not an adiabatic boundary. It is not a diathermal boundary, however, in the sense that temperature equilibrium is not maintained, all right. So basically pressure is held constant. When I am adding heat, I am essentially changing the temperature of the system, how much expansion takes place for the system. Now pressure is held constant, like we were discussing in the earlier slide. Basically the system pressure, the internal pressure and the external pressure are always in balance. If there is an increase in the internal pressure, then the boundary moves outward from the system towards the surroundings to equalize this pressure with the surroundings, and vice versa. If the external pressure is higher, if the internal pressure reduces, then the boundary will move back very quickly, reversibly it will move back, so that the internal and external pressure at the boundary are balanced. So the question that we are asking is mechanical equilibrium has already been established. Now there is no thermal equilibrium. We are adding heat and therefore there is an increase in temperature. How much is this volume changing, system expanding? This is the coefficient of thermal expansion. So this is basically measured as change in volume with respect to, of course, there is a ratio of the volume of the system. What is the change in volume with respect to increasing the temperature of the system by virtue of addition of heat? The energy added to the system is by virtue of heat transfer. So there is an increase in temperature. How much is the change in volume? And this is measured at constant pressure throughout mechanical equilibrium is maintained. Now let us ask the other question. We flip the whole thing. Instead of throughout maintaining mechanical equilibrium, we are going to throughout maintain thermal equilibrium. We make the boundary completely diathermal and the temperature is constant. Now what is happening is there is pressure applied. So in this particular situation, we are asking if there is an additional external pressure. So the internal pressure and the external pressure are no longer equal to each other. That means there is no longer mechanical equilibrium. Now there is an applied external pressure which causes compression, right? So this applied external pressure will cause the volume of the system to decrease, while the boundary is maintained as diathermal. That means thermal equilibrium is maintained. So what is this change in volume of the system? This is the measure of isothermal compressibility of the system, and this is given by a kappa T with a subscript T to indicate that this compressibility is measured under isothermal conditions. In other words, so there is again we are looking at a change in volume with respect to the system volume, and we put a negative sign because there is a decrease in the volume. This numerator is going to be negative. So in this manner, isothermal compressibility becomes a positive quantity because there is also a negative sign in front of this expression, right? So how much is there a change, reduction in volume due to change in applied external pressure, all right, at constant temperature while the system is in thermal equilibrium with the surroundings. So this is isothermal compressibility. So if we were to take a ratio of these two quantities, beta by kappa T is basically this partial derivative multiplied by inverse of this partial derivative, and from cyclic relation, since we are looking at volume, temperature and pressure, the product of those three partial derivatives sequentially is equal to -1. So from there we can write these two as dou P dou T at constant volume. So the ratio of coefficient of thermal expansion to the isothermal compressibility is simply the partial derivative of pressure with respect to temperature at constant volume. So if there were a PVT relationship for a system, for the content of the system, then it is possible to estimate the ratio of these two coefficients. Now we are looking at another compressibility. So here again mechanical equilibrium is not achieved. So you are applying an additional external pressure which causes the system to compress. However, now we are asking what is the change in volume when the boundary is not diathermal, when thermal equilibrium is not established at all, rather the boundary is adiabatic. So in other words, of course, we are looking at this adiabatic process as a reversible adiabatic process which results in constant entropy. If the process is an irreversible adiabatic process, the entropy would increase for the system, right? So we are looking at a reversible adiabatic process, and therefore we are looking at how much compression or how much change in volume of the system takes place due to an applied external pressure when the boundary is adiabatic, and it is not it is of course moving, but it has not reached mechanical equilibrium yet, and there is no possibility for thermal equilibrium. So this is the question of isentropic or reversible adiabatic compressibility. Reversible is not usually mentioned when one says adiabatic compressibility. It is assumed that it is really isentropic compressibility. And so this kappa has a subscript S, which is used to distinguish it from the other kappa, which is isothermal compressibility, which has a subscript T. Now again you notice that the structure of this formula, this definition is very similar to that of isothermal compressibility. How much is there a change in volume with respect to the volume of the system? How much change in volume is there when there is a pressure applied, except that the variable that is held constant is entropy and not temperature. So now we can ask ourselves, these two have to be related to each other. What is the relationship between isothermal compressibility and adiabatic compressibility? That is what we are going to try and explore in this slide and the next slide. Both quantities measure the fractional change in volume due to the application of pressure under, of course, different processes One process is an isothermal process, the other process is a reversible adiabatic process or isentropic process. To relate these two, okay, we look at two functions: entropy as a function of pressure and temperature, and volume as a function of pressure and entropy. Now, since entropy is a function of pressure and temperature, then a differential change in entropy is due to change in pressure or change in temperature. There are two partial derivatives. Similarly, when we are looking at volume, the change in volume is due to either change in pressure or change in entropy. So we substitute the expression for ds into dv. Okay. So where we had dou v dou s at constant pressure times ds, now we have just substituted the expression for s as a function of pt. We got a ds and we substituted that as it is. Okay. So now what we do is we use the Maxwell relation for Gibbs free energy, which gives dou s dou p at constant temperature is dou v dou t at constant pressure. So now we eliminate one of this ds. Okay. So otherwise the relationship, the equations are exactly identical, except for dou s dou p at constant temperature, we have substituted a minus of dou v dou t at constant pressure. So since we are looking at constant temperature for isothermal compressibility, so we will basically then take this particular condition, constant temperature, dt will be 0. At constant temperature, then dv is basically due to this quantity and this quantity alone. Both are due to change in pressure. No, so therefore they can all be combined. At constant temperature, dv is simply this. So then from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the derivative of volume with respect to pressure at constant temperature. Okay, so this gives me dou v dou p at constant temperature, right? So I can then take this derivative, because throughout this expression has been obtained at constant temperature. Dou v dou p at constant temperature will simply be dou v dou p at constant entropy minus this product, dou v dou s at constant pressure times dou v dou t at constant pressure. So what have we obtained? We have obtained that there is this partial derivative of volume with respect to pressure at constant temperature is equal to partial derivative of volume with respect to pressure at constant entropy minus this quantity, product of these two partial derivatives. Now notice that both these partial derivatives measure change in volume with respect to an applied pressure, except that one on the left hand side is, this partial derivative is measured at constant temperature, whereas the one on the right hand side is measured at constant entropy. These two therefore are related to isothermal compressibility and isentropic reversible adiabatic compressibility. And of course the last term dou v dou t at constant pressure, this is related to the coefficient of thermal expansion. So these three expressions are available for us. When we substitute these definitions into the above relationship, we get dou v dou p at constant temperature is minus v into kappa t, and then dou v dou p at constant entropy is minus v into kappa s, and dou v dou t at constant pressure is plus beta into v, but however there is a minus sign here, so we have minus v beta into dou v dou s at constant pressure. So now we almost have a relationship between the isothermal compressibility and isentropic compressibility, as well as of course coefficient of thermal expansion, except that we need to find a way to determine what this partial derivative, change in volume with respect to change in entropy at constant pressure, is. And for this, we observe that dou V dou T at constant pressure is simply beta into V, and dou S dou T at constant pressure is Cp by T. So therefore, if we can then take the ratio of these, then we will get dou V dou S at constant pressure, which will give T into V into beta by Cp. So that we can use to substitute here, and therefore minus V kappa T is minus V kappa S minus T V square beta square by Cp, and we can of course cancel minus V throughout, and therefore we get this expression, this relationship between isothermal compressibility and isentropic compressibility. And notice that the quantities here, beta is a positive quantity, temperature is a positive quantity, volume is a positive quantity, specific heat is a positive quantity. Therefore, isentropic compressibility is always greater than isothermal compressibility is always greater than isentropic or adiabatic compressibility. And why is this? In other words, what are we talking about? We are basically saying that there is more change in volume for an applied constant, fixed constant change in pressure when the system is in thermal equilibrium with the surroundings than when the system is insulated, perfectly thermally insulated from the surroundings. So there is more change in volume. In other words, there is more compression happens when there is isothermal boundary versus when there is an adiabatic or isentropic or adiabatic boundary, no heat exchange taking place. And why would this be? This would be because now the requirement of diathermal boundary means part of the added energy by way of compression has to be spent for maintaining the temperature, right, constant temperature. And so there is additional energy exchange that is taking place in addition to this applied external pressure here, whereas here it is only the applied external pressure that is causing the change in volume, and therefore the isothermal compressibility ends up being greater than the isentropic or adiabatic compressibility. Next, we turn our attention to Joule-Thomson coefficient and throttling. Now, what is this throttling and how does this Joule-Thomson coefficient arise? This has to do with expansion of a gas, which we know causes cooling, while compression will cause heating if the temperature is not maintained constant. To measure the extent of cooling, one may construct a process by expansion, right? One may construct an expansion process in such a manner that there is no heat exchange with the surroundings. Okay, there are many ways in which we can construct such a process where there is no heat exchange with the surroundings. So here are some of the examples. One is a reversible expansion without heat exchange, which is the first thing that you might have thought of. An adiabatic expansion, since there is no heat exchange, by moving the boundary infinitesimally at a time, a very slow process, but you always maintain equilibrium and you maintain entropy constant. Okay, so this is one way in which you can cause expansion of a gas without heat exchange. Okay, and then you find out how much of internal temperature decrease has happened. The other one is a free irreversible expansion without heat exchange, and this is an irreversible expansion where entropy is not held constant. So this is not a very slow process. This is quite the opposite of this earlier reversible expansion. You basically take a sudden expansion, so sudden that the boundary is moved faster than the fastest moving molecules. In other words, there is no work done by the gas during the expansion, right? So you move the boundary so fast that even before those molecules can exert any pressure on the boundary and do work, the boundary has moved to the new position, new volume, and therefore this expansion is a free expansion, completely free, just blasts off, irreversible process, of course. And in such a process, the internal energy is held constant because there is no heat exchange, and there is really no pressure volume work done either, and therefore the internal energy of the system is held constant. The third process which we are going to be focusing on is throttling. This is also an irreversible process where there is no heat exchange, all right, but there is work done. There is work done because the fluid or the system flows. Now there is a flow work that is done from a region of pressure P1 to a pressure P2. So therefore internal energy is not constant, but U plus PV is constant, and therefore enthalpy is constant. If the process is isenthalpic, we will see why this is so in the upcoming slides. But this is the idea of throttling. So you basically take the fluid through a valve or a porous plug, and the valve is so small and probably insulated to the point where there is no significant heat exchange taking place with the surroundings. However, there is definitely work done by the gas or by the liquid. So here is what we are looking at from one region of pressure P1 to another region of pressure P2 through some sort of a valve or a porous plug. So why is enthalpy constant in throttling? So the system, the gas or liquid, flows irreversibly through the valve or plug. There is no heat transfer because the system is insulated. The expansion occurs fast enough that there is no time for heat transfer to occur. Either one of the two cases. Either the system is perfectly insulated, or even if the system is not perfectly insulated, the characteristic time of expansion is much shorter than the characteristic time of heat transfer, in that by the time the expansion is over, there is hardly any heat transfer that has taken place. Now gas or liquid, whichever is the system, does some flow work on the surroundings due to expansion. So this work done is given by P1 V1 minus P2 V2. So this here it is PV, pressure volume, here it is pressure volume is P1 V1, here it is P2 V2. Since there is no change in the number of moles of the gas or liquid, in other words, this system is not going to cause any kind of loss or gain of the gas or liquid to the surroundings or from the surroundings, and therefore there is no change in the number of moles of the gas or liquid flowing through from one region to another. So U1 minus U2 is simply the net heat transfer. This is one mode of energy exchange. The other is the mode of energy exchange by way of flow work, and there is no species exchange work. So since there is no heat transfer, U1 minus U2 is simply P1 V1 minus P2 V2. So this change in internal energy is simply due to the work done by the gas or liquid on the surroundings, and therefore if you take these two to their respective sides, U1 plus P1 V1 is U2 plus P2 V2. In other words, H1 is H2. Therefore enthalpy becomes constant, but this is an irreversible process, please keep in mind. So what is this Joule-Thomson coefficient? So when you say that there is cooling by expansion, there is a change in pressure, there is a reduction in pressure, and there is a reduction in temperature. So what is this change? This is measured under isenthalpic conditions. This is called Joule-Thomson coefficient. Now in order to obtain this Joule-Thomson coefficient, since there are three variables involved, h, t and p, let us consider a function of h, t, p to be 0, some arbitrary function, and we have a cyclic relation that says dou h dou t at constant pressure times dou t dou p at constant enthalpy, which is your Joule-Thomson coefficient, times dou p dou h at constant temperature is -1. And therefore from this we can then write dou t dou p at constant enthalpy, which is Joule-Thomson coefficient. This is given by, you take this to the other side, so you get dou H dou P at constant temperature. So you get the inverse of this divided by this quantity dou H dou T at constant pressure. We can easily recognize that this quantity is specific heat capacity at constant pressure. Whereas the other one, dou H dou P at constant temperature, is V into 1 minus beta into temperature. Now how this comes about, we will see in one of the future slides. For the time being, you take this for granted, and therefore this can be substituted here, and then we get an expression for Joule-Thomson coefficient is as V by Cp into T beta minus 1. Of course, we still have to obtain this expression, which we will obtain when we relate enthalpy as a function of temperature and pressure, which is coming in a forthcoming slide. Now we are going to write internal energy as a function of temperature and volume. U is a function of dV, therefore du is either due to dt or due to dV or some linear combination of the two. Dou U dou T at constant volume is Cv, and we just have to therefore evaluate dou U dou V at constant temperature. But we know du is TdS minus TdV. Therefore, if I have to differentiate this throughout with respect to volume, keeping temperature constant, then this Cv is du is T dou S dou V at constant temperature minus P. Of course, this is simply unity. Dou S dou V at constant temperature, from the Maxwell relation for Helmholtz free energy, molar Helmholtz free energy, we get this to be dou P dou T at constant volume. So we can just substitute this expression here. But we know dou P dou T at constant volume is simply beta by kappa T, which we already derived earlier. And therefore, du is simply Cv dt plus T beta by kappa T minus P into dV. So this is the general expression for internal energy, molar internal energy, as a function of temperature and molar volume. Similarly, we can obtain an expression for enthalpy as a function of temperature and pressure. Please keep in mind that this expression where we are going to get dou H dou P at constant temperature is what was used in the expression for evaluating the expression for Joule-Thomson coefficient. So if you take enthalpy to be a function of temperature and pressure, change in enthalpy could either be due to change in temperature or change in pressure or a linear combination of both, molar enthalpy of course. Now again we can realize immediately that dou H dou T at constant pressure is simply specific heat capacity at constant pressure. So we just have to evaluate this particular partial derivative. Yet again, similar to what we did here, dH is TdS plus VdP, molar change in molar enthalpy. And so if we were to evaluate dou H dou P at constant temperature, so then we would get simply T times dou S dou P at constant temperature plus V into this would become unity. And so we can use the Maxwell relation from Gibbs free energy, molar Gibbs free energy, and then write this as dou S dou P at constant temperature is simply minus dou V dou T at constant pressure. So we get V minus T into dou V dou T at constant pressure. So this is what we are evaluating. This is what we need to use here, and what we use for Joule-Thomson coefficient. Now for this basically is dou V dou T at constant pressure is basically how much is the system volume changing due to changing temperature, due to heat addition at constant pressure. That's related to coefficient of thermal expansion, and therefore dou V dou T at constant pressure is simply V beta. So therefore this quantity is V minus TV beta. So V into 1 minus beta T, which was what was used in the expression for Joule-Thomson coefficient as well. So molar enthalpy, change in molar enthalpy or dH is simply Cp dt plus V into 1 minus beta T times dP. Last but not least, we are going to look at entropy as a function of temperature volume and as a function of temperature pressure. So consider entropy as a function of temperature volume. Again, we can write ds is either due to dt or dv or a linear combination of both. Now dou s dou t at constant volume is simply cv by t, and this from Maxwell relation is simply dou p dou t at constant volume. This is from the Helmholtz free energy, molar Helmholtz free energies Maxwell relation, and this of course Cv is T into dou S dou T at constant V, which we already obtained. Now dou P dou T at constant V is beta by kappa T, and therefore ds is Cv dt by T plus beta by kappa T dV. Similarly, if we were to express entropy as a function of temperature and pressure, so similar expression can be obtained. So here what is the difference? Dou S dou T at constant pressure times dt plus dou S dou T at constant temperature times dP. So now either due to change in molar entropy, could either be due to change in temperature or change in pressure or some linear combination of the two. Dou S dou T at constant pressure is simply Cp by T. So that gives you Cp by T dt. And then from Gibbs free energies Maxwell relation, dou S dou P at constant temperature is minus dou V dou T at constant pressure. And again you see dou V dou T at constant pressure is V beta. So ds is Cp dt by T minus beta V into dP. To summarize, what have we done? We have derived Maxwell relations corresponding to different thermodynamic potentials in the previous part of the lecture. Using the thermodynamic framework developed so far, note that we have not yet even one model of a system we have not developed. We have not looked at a gas or a liquid or a solid. So we have not considered something like an ideal gas or Van der Waals gas or some sort of liquid like one with ideal liquid or some sort of regular solution, or liquid with some hydrogen bonds or long range bonds, electrolytes. Or you've not looked at a solid like an FCC, BCC, cubic crystal, or some sort of monoclinic rhombohedral crystal or anything like that. We have not yet even touched the development of a model of a system. The thermodynamic framework we have developed, we have obtained expressions for various thermodynamic properties. So then for each model of a system, we can use all these expressions and obtain measurable quantities of thermodynamic properties. And therefore we can characterize how each system is going to behave, whatever be that system is going to behave when subject to various processes of energy exchange. Particularly what we have done mostly focuses on reversible processes. So we look at what are the end states, equilibrium states of these systems undergoing various reversible processes. So we have defined in this particular part of the lecture the coefficient of thermal expansion, isothermal compressibility, adiabatic compressibility, Joule-Thomson coefficient, specific heats, and the difference between specific heats, internal energy as a function of temperature volume, enthalpy as a function of temperature pressure. This is a pressure, not volume. And entropy as a function of temperature volume and temperature pressure. So with that we come to the end or conclusion of this particular part of the lecture on Maxwell relations and thermodynamic properties. Now there are so many properties that have been derived, and there are so many small derivations that are involved. So I would urge all of you to please go back and look at these derivations piece by piece, and so that you are able to follow everything. Okay, and you're able to see how this general thermodynamic framework, starting from the fundamental notion that the state of a thermodynamic system can be defined by either its energy or entropy, and what are the different types of energies, and depending on what kind of interactions take place between the system and surroundings, depending on the nature of the boundaries, right? we have developed this sort of a framework where we have ended up deriving expressions for so many different properties, most of them in measurable terms at the end of the day, without so far developing a model of any thermodynamic system. So in the next lecture, what we intend to do is to take one example of an ideal gas, so whose model will be derived, whose equation of state PVT relationship will be derived, and then we will go through this entire set of thermodynamic properties that we have developed in these lectures, and then see how does an ideal gas behave under various processes. And then we will also look at how do mixtures of ideal gas behave under various processes. Eventually, I hope to also develop lectures for what is a van der Waals gas, where there is interaction between various gas molecules, some form of interaction, weak interaction, nonetheless interaction. Then again look at how does a van der Waals gas behave through various such processes. What are all its thermodynamic properties? And then similarly, we will have a lecture on a model, developing a model for a liquid or a solid, and then look at various properties of liquid and solid, and then we will consider mixtures of liquids. So basically we'll consider an ideal solution, and we'll consider some form of interacting, of course all liquids, because of virtue of condensed phase, interact, but we will look at additional interaction energies, and then we will look at what is called a regular solution. I intend to do all of these over a course of time, so these will all together form a series of lectures. So I hope you are able to follow the big picture of what the plan is and how all that we have done so far fits into this larger plan. I'd be very happy to take any questions that you may have. As always, you can post your questions in the on the YouTube channel in the discussion section, or you can reach me. My website is given, and therefore my email ID is also available on the YouTube channel from the website. So you can always reach me, and you can also reach me otherwise if you're already a student in one of my courses. So with that, I thank you for listening to this lecture. I hope you have a wonderful day.